Today I want to show you guys the easiest way that I know to get dinner on the table in just 15 minutes. Let's go. So the best way that I know to get dinner on the table super fast during the week is, you guessed it, freezer cooking. So I thought today it would be fun. I'm actually going to cook this freezer meal that I made up a few weeks ago. It's an Instant Pot vegetable soup, and I thought that while I cooked this, I would basically give you the whole rundown on freezer cooking. So consider this the ultimate guide to freezer meals. Okay, so first off, what is freezer cooking? There's many different versions of this, but essentially it is preparing ingredients and freezing them so that you can cook them way more quickly and easily at a later date. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. Obviously, there are more dump and go freezer meals like the ones I'm going to make today, but you can also do freezer cooking with casseroles and different types of foods like breakfast burritos and cookies and muffins and things like that. So really the sky is the limit. I really like using freezer cooking for dinner because it takes that mental energy out of what I'm going to make for the day. If I know that I've got something waiting for me that I thawed out in the fridge, I can just pop it either in the slow cooker in the morning or the Instant Pot in the evening. Or if it's a casserole, I can pop it in the oven, and usually I don't have to make that many sides or things to go with it. Typically, you might just need like some tortillas if it's like a taco filling, or some rice if it's a dish that you serve over rice. For something like a soup or a stew, obviously a loaf of bread or a salad will make a great side. So for me, it's just something that really helps me out in the kitchen, especially after a long day. Some of the benefits of freezer cooking that I've already talked about are that it saves you time, but freezer cooking can also really save you a lot of money, because what I like to do is I like to bulk prep a lot of freezer meals in advance, and that means that I can take advantage of bulk sales. So say my grocery store has chicken breast on sale for $1.99 a pound and I want to stock up on it. I can go ahead and grab several packages of that and then find a bunch of chicken freezer meals that I can put together in an afternoon. A lot of times I will do batch freezer meal prep. So I'll take like a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon and I'll put together, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 freezer meals. That way I'm only dirtying my kitchen once. I get them all made, and then I have a variety of meals to eat over the next couple of weeks. Freezer cooking can also help you eat a lot healthier. Obviously, you have a lot of control over what's going into your food, and you're going to be less likely to eat out, especially if you have freezer meals ready to go for you that are super convenient and delicious. And I find that when I talk to people, some people will say that they don't like freezer meals or they don't like crock pot meals because they're bland and mushy. That's not true at all. You just have to find really good recipes. And to me, I feel like adding things to the freezer meal are really what makes it good, right? So I talked earlier about like adding rice to something, or maybe you're gonna garnish like a soup, for example, with tortilla chips and some sour cream and some fresh cilantro. So just think about the types of things that can be accompaniments or garnishes with your freezer meals, and that can really add a lot of variety and fresh flavor to maybe something that's cooked in the crock pot all day. Okay, so if you're watching this video, probably one of your responsibilities or maybe one of your roles in your family is to get dinner on the table for your family every night. But something you should also be thinking of is really protecting your family's financial future. And that is why I am excited that Fabric by Gerber Life is sponsoring today's video. So thank you to them. You guys know that I've been working with them for a long time here on my channel, and I'm really glad to partner with them because I personally believe, as does my husband, that no matter who you are or what you do, everyone needs life insurance, especially if you're a working parent like me and your family depends on you for your income. No one really wants to sit there and think about what might happen if you're not here anymore, but it's something that as a parent you really need to do. My family depends on me for my income, and so that's why Adam and I actually both have life insurance policies on each of us, so that if something happens to us, we know that our kids and our family are going to be well taken care of. If you're not familiar with Fabric, they were actually designed by parents for parents to help you get a high quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy, and you can do it in less than 10 minutes. That's another thing that I really love about fabric is like none of us have time to be going through these long, convoluted processes of trying to get life insurance. So fabric makes it super easy. They also have flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. If you guys check out my link below, you could actually go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. The other thing I really like about fabric is that there's no risk to apply. They actually have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can cancel at any time. Fabric by Gerber Life is trusted by tons of people. They actually have over 1,700 5-star reviews, and they are rated as excellent on Trustpilot. And if you're interested in more than just life insurance, they have an easy digital platform that also lets you create wills, access college savings funds, and manage your family's finances right from your phone, so your family is prepared for anything. So join the thousands of parents who trust fabric to protect their family. I'll have a link in the description box below. You can apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/Jen. That's MEET fabric.com/Jen. Don't forget to check out that link in the description box below. I'll also have it on the screen right here. If you're on your phone, you can tap on that to apply in minutes. So go to meetfabric.com/Jen to apply today, risk-free, and get your family protected. I just realized I was talking to you about putting my bag of frozen food, my freezer meal, into the Instant Pot, and I didn't even press record. So joke's on me. But anyway, you didn't miss much. Basically, all I did was I transferred the contents of this freezer bag into my Instant Pot. Like I said, this is an Instant Pot vegetable soup. It happens to be vegetarian. If you want to keep it vegetarian and vegan, you can use veggie stock. I'm going to use chicken stock. You could also use beef stock if you wanted, but I'm going to show you like just how quick and easy this is to get dinner on the table. Another thing I wanted to mention is that if you dump out your freezer bag into your pot and it still has a lot of like seasonings and spices or residue in it that you don't want to waste, just put a little bit of water in here and splash it around and then throw it into the pot. Okay, so this recipe is actually from the FreezerFit website, and a lot of their recipes you do have to kind of add some broth or stock or something, especially if you're going to cook this in the Instant Pot. So I have 4 cups of chicken broth here. This is just chicken bouillon that I reconstituted with some water. I always keep that in the spice cabinet because I use it so often. I'm just gonna go ahead and give this a stir. And I've got my recipe printed off right here. The FreezerFit website has hundreds and hundreds, I'm not even kidding you, hundreds of recipes. I actually personally have hundreds of recipes on there that I have been writing over the past several years. So it's a great resource. But this says to cook on manual high pressure for 8 minutes and then allow for a 5-minute natural pressure release. So just put the lid on, and then I wanna make sure that it's sealing. I actually like to turn my Instant Pot so that when the steam comes out, it doesn't wreck my cabinets. So I'll do that once it starts cooking, but I'm gonna do manual high for 8 minutes and then just push start. Okay, so that's seriously how easy it is. Like, imagine coming home from work at night and just being able to dump that in there and just go about your night. Maybe you got a bagged salad, you got a loaf of garlic bread in the freezer, boom, dinner is done. Okay, so specifically for freezer meals, there are definitely foods that freeze better than others. Typically, any type of like vegetable with a really high water content doesn't necessarily freeze the best. So like lettuce, for example, or cucumbers, those are veggies that are super high in water content. And so if you try to freeze them and then thaw them back out, basically all that water is just gonna seep out of the veggies and you're gonna end up with a mess. But some of the best foods to freeze are like soups and stews like this, because you're gonna cook it all together anyway. Casseroles are a really great option to freeze. Marinated meat is something else that I do quite frequently. So basically you can make freezer meal packs by putting, you know, chicken or steak or pork chops into a bag, throwing your marinade in there, and then sticking it in the freezer. And then once you thaw it out, you can either cook it in the oven or on the stovetop, or like even on the grill if it's nice enough outside. Typically muffins and breads freeze really well too. So sometimes what I'll do if I'm making muffins is I'll make like an extra batch and then wrap them in plastic wrap and freeze them individually in a big Ziploc bag. And they're super easy to defrost either on the counter, or you can also defrost them in the microwave. Another thing that's really great for freezer meals is like large cuts of meat. So like a beef chuck roast or a pork shoulder roast, or maybe even a whole chicken or something like that. Those large cuts of meat are gonna hold up really well in the freezer, and they're really best suited for slow cooking anyway, right? So like the longer that you slow cook like a chuck roast or a pork roast or something like that, it's gonna get really tender, it's gonna fall apart when you make it. And those are some of the best cuts of meat, especially if you can get them on sale. Sometimes I can find at my grocery store like really large like pork loins or pork shoulder roast, and you can actually cut them into like 2 or 3 pieces and make several meals out of them. And then it's just really easy to, you know, make several freezer meals in one go. Another question that people often ask is, how long do things last in the freezer? Typically, if you have a deep freezer, I would say that you can freeze freezer meals up to 6 months. A lot of times we say 90 days just because sometimes the quality is going to be affected. Freezer burn is actually not unsafe to eat, right? It just means that there are like ice crystals on the food. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the food is bad. It might be like the quality might be impacted, but if something's just freezer burnt and it's been kept at, you know, a stable temperature in the freezer over time, it's not like you're gonna get sick from eating it. Typically foods are gonna last longer in a deep freeze because the temperature is colder than they will in like a refrigerator freezer. But if you don't have a deep freeze, don't worry about it. Obviously, as long as your freezer stays at a consistently cold temperature, you're gonna be just fine. If you're gonna be making a lot of freezer meals and you wanna save money on reusable bags, I also do recommend these SPLF brand reusable bags. You can get them on Amazon, so I'll link them down below. Another super inexpensive item that comes in super handy for freezer meals are these bag holders. I do not make freezer meals without these. It's one of those things where you think, do I really need that? But then once you have them and you use them, it just makes your life so much easier. Basically, all you do is you know, clip your bag in there and then it holds it up so you're able to fill it up super easily, and I can link these down below as well. Another thing also to keep in mind is just like planning and batch freezer prepping all at once. And one of the ways that I do that is, I mentioned the FreezerFit website. I highly recommend their membership. I have a ton of recipes on there, and it's a way that I can share original recipes with you guys without having to like build my own membership site. So I've really enjoyed contributing over there. I recommend their site because it's super convenient to be able to plan out what freezer meals that you want to make. And they even have like a shopping list feature on their site as well. So you can basically go through, pick your recipes. It will generate a shopping list for you. You can print it out, either order your groceries or take it to the store and shop. You can also, like I said, print out all of the recipes so you have those on hand, especially if you're gonna batch freezer prep. That's also super convenient. So I'll link their site down below. If you're not sure if you want to join, you can actually take a free cooking class and you'll get a free cookbook with that, all of my recipes. So you could try that out, or you could just join. It's just a one-time fee. This is not sponsored by them. I just really love their site, and it's a great resource if you want to get into freezer cooking. Another common question that people have is storing freezer meals. So what I like to recommend is actually freezing and storing them flat. A lot of people will think they just basically put all the ingredients in here and then just plop it into their freezer, but then what you end up with are kind of these weird shaped bags that take up a lot of room. If you can try to freeze these flat, you can stack them on top of one another. The only way that that doesn't really work is if it's like a large cut of meat, like a roast or something like that. But for most recipes, you can store them flat, and that will save a lot of room in your freezer. I also recommend freezer or foil pans. That's something that I use quite frequently, especially when I'm making casserole freezer meals. So I like to buy those in bulk, either on Amazon, or you can also get them at Costco. They are a really great price at Costco. Walmart actually has a lot of options too for like different sized freezer meal pans. So for example, I usually use like the 9x13, but for some recipes, I might want like a round, like a smaller pan, or maybe a square pan if it's like a breakfast casserole or something like that. So there's definitely lots of sizes that you can find. Okay, the next tip I have is to label your food. I don't know how many times I have told myself, I'm gonna remember what this is, and then I throw it in my freezer, and a couple months later, I have no idea what it is. That's another great thing about the FreezerFit website, is that their recipes also have printable labels with them. So you can actually get like just the Avery like quarter sheet labels and print them out. It's super easy. That way when you're making all your freezer meal recipes, you can just slap the labels right on there and boom, you're ready to go. And then you're gonna know exactly what it is and how to cook it. That's the other thing too, is that it has the instructions right on there. Something else I wanted to talk about is defrosting freezer meals. So a lot of recipes will call to defrost them in the refrigerator overnight. And especially if you're cooking it in a slow cooker, even in an Instant Pot, you know, it's definitely okay to put it in there partially frozen. If it's something that you need it to be like totally thawed, like let's say you're grilling chicken or steak that's marinated or something like that, I would actually recommend taking it out 2 days ahead of time. Depending on the temperature of your refrigerator, it might take a little bit longer to thaw out, but thawing food in the refrigerator is really the safest place to do it. It's not really safe to thaw food on the counter because it's gonna get in that danger temperature zone where bacteria can grow. So definitely when you're thawing out your freezer meals, regardless of, you know, whether it's in a bag, like it's a soup or a stew or it's a casserole, just thaw it in the refrigerator. Some other things that I like to freeze that aren't necessarily meals but are components of meals are marinara sauce. So for example, if I'm going to make lasagna or spaghetti, sometimes I'll make extra marinara sauce with ground beef in it, and that freezes super, super well. I usually just put it in a gallon or a quart freezer bag, stick it in the freezer, and then on down the road, all I have to do is defrost it and heat it up, and boom, we've got spaghetti. Another thing that I really like to freeze is like cooked rice and grains. So you can very easily freeze cooked rice. It actually freezes super well. You can freeze it in a Ziploc bag. I've also seen people freeze it in like those super cubes or muffin tins if you want just like individual portions. Quinoa also freezes super well. Those are just things that sometimes if I'm making them, I'll make extra. Same thing with like ground beef. If I'm browning up some ground beef, sometimes I'll just brown up a bunch. That way I can either put it in the fridge or like we're talking about today in the freezer, and then all you have to do is defrost it and use it in your recipes. It really does make cooking a lot easier. Another thing that I freeze that isn't really a meal, but you guys have probably seen me do this before, is fruit. So if I have bananas that are getting ready to go bad, or if I have some berries in the fridge that we didn't eat, I'll stick those in a freezer bag and just put them in the freezer, and then they're really good in smoothies. You can also thaw out frozen bananas and use them like for banana bread or banana bars or something like that. So that's a great option as well. Chili is another thing that I always make extra of. If I'm ever making a pot of chili, I always just make a huge pot regardless of who's gonna be eating it. And then what I like to do is I like to get kind of the 4-cup plastic containers. I can link them down below on Amazon. And those are great for freezing marinara sauce as well, but especially for chili. You can put 4 cups of chili in there, which is enough for a couple people, or you can also thaw it out and make like chili mac or chili dogs with it. Chili freezes really well. I actually think that sometimes it tastes even better after it's been refrigerated or frozen because the flavors have time to mingle. One thing I would say is that most soups and stews will freeze really well. The only thing I would caution against is freezing soup that has cooked pasta in it. A lot of times once you freeze cooked pasta and then you heat it back up, it's just gonna get mushy and fall apart. So with a lot of the freezer meal recipes that I use, it actually calls to add the pasta like at the end of cooking. It's not to say that you can't freeze that, but just know that the quality of the pasta might be affected. Something, you know, a soup with rice in it, like a chicken rice soup, that's probably gonna freeze and thaw out and cook a lot better than something with pasta in it. Okay, so as we're waiting for our Instant Pot veggie soup to finish, I just wanna kind of walk you through, if I'm going to do a big freezer meal prep on the weekend, these are kind of the steps that I would take to do that. So first of all, decide what you want to freezer meal prep. Most of the time I do dinners, but sometimes I do breakfast as well. You can do breakfast casseroles, like I said, or breakfast burritos freeze really well. So kind of decide what recipes that you wanna make, print them off. If you're using the FreezerFit website, it's super easy to make your shopping list at the same time as well. I am someone that really likes printing off my recipes just because I like having the paper as I'm making it, and then I don't have to keep turning on my phone and looking on Pinterest and different things like that. But then it's also easy for me to make my shopping list as well. So once I have all of my recipes chosen, then I'm gonna make my shopping list. I am probably gonna get grocery delivery because it saves me so much time. Then I don't have to go to the grocery store. You can also just try to choose recipes with items that you already have on hand if you are trying to use up stuff in your pantry and freezer. Another thing that I try to do is I try to batch prep similar things all at once. So like for example, a couple weeks ago, I did a bunch of ground beef freezer meals where I basically browned up, you know, 5 pounds of ground beef, and then I had enough for 4 freezer meals. That works too if you can find the meat on sale, or even if you're just kind of wanting to make it simpler and batch prep a bunch of the same type of food. The next thing is to make sure that you have all of your tools and your supplies on hand. So whether that's reusable bags or Ziploc bags, your baggie holders, if you're making casseroles, you definitely want to have those freezer pans. Sometimes with breakfast burritos, I like to wrap them individually in wax paper before I put them in the bag. That way they don't stick together. So just make sure that you have all of that stuff on hand before you start your prep as well. The other thing that I like to do to make my freezer meal prep really, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and let the steam out of this. Another thing that I really like to do is to use my kitchen appliances to help me when I'm freezer cooking. So for example, I really like to use my food processor to shred cheese. So if I'm making a bunch of recipes that call for shredded cheese, I'll just buy a big block at the grocery store and then shred it myself. It tastes better and it melts better that way anyway. Another great way you can use your food processor is to chop batches of onions or carrots or celery. You can just kind of cut them in chunks and put them in there and pulse it a couple times. If you're someone that doesn't like to stand there and use a knife and chop like a crazy person like I do, like I like to chop, I like to chop vegetables, but you can also use your food processor for that. If you need like shredded veggies, my food processor also has a shredding blade. It has a slicing blade. So think about different ways that you can use your kitchen appliances to help you with tasks like that. Another thing that I really recommend as you're freezer cooking is to batch kind of like chop and prep your ingredients. So for example, if I'm making 5 freezer meals and I know that each of them calls for a chopped onion, I'm probably just gonna chop all my onions at once and throw them in a bowl, and then that way I can just use a measuring cup to scoop them out into my bags. Same with like ground meat. If you have a bunch of freezer meal recipes that call for like cooked ground sausage or cooked ground beef, you know, do it in a batch all at once, and then you have it ready to go as you're assembling everything. Just think of like how an assembly line works, and you're doing kind of like tasks at the same time. It just makes everything a lot easier if you have all of your ingredients prepped and ready to go into your freezer bags. Another thing that I like to do kind of in that same idea is to measure all my spices ahead of time. So I'll take all of my spices out of my cupboard that I'm gonna be using for those freezer meals, and then I'll use little bowls to prep and measure them out in. So that way I'm not standing there while I'm trying to put together the freezer bags doing like, okay, this one needs garlic, this one needs garlic, this one needs paprika. Like I can just dump all the spices in there and be done with it. Another thing I kind of forgot to mention with appliances is your KitchenAid mixer. If you have one of those, it works really well for making meatloaf or meatballs. If you're making freezer meals that are meatloaf, or if you're prepping meatballs or something like that and you're making a large batch, I highly recommend using your KitchenAid mixer, it does a great job of mixing together meat with all of the other ingredients. The other thing that I like to do is kind of just do all my dishes at once at the end of the freezer prep. And if you haven't ever done freezer cooking before, you're probably feeling like pretty overwhelmed by this, but the whole point of doing it is to basically batch your time, right? So it's sort of like doing your homework. You are going to be prepared and you're gonna study for the test, and you're gonna spend a couple hours on a weekend getting ready for your dinners after work to save you that much more time, right? So if you've never done freezer cooking before, I definitely encourage you to start small, just maybe prep 2 or 3 and see how you like it. Back to the part that I got off track with the dishes is what I was saying is when I'm freezer meal cooking, I don't necessarily clean as I go because it's just gonna slow me down. I just wanna get all of the ingredients into my freezer bags, labeled and into the freezer, and then I can worry about cleanup. But what I'll do is I'll kind of fill up my sink with hot soapy water, and then I can just toss all my dishes in there as I go along. Once all my meals are put together and in the freezer, then I'll go ahead and clean up. All right, so let's go ahead and check our veggie soup. It smells really, really good. Okay, so at this point, what I like to do is taste it because everyone has different tastes, and you might want a different or more seasoning that's currently in there. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the bay leaf as well. I like to just get a small dish or a bowl and ladle some of the soup into there. That way I get a little bit of everything and I can go ahead and taste the broth and see if it needs more salt or pepper or anything else. Okay, so that soup is perfect. It needs nothing. It actually has, I forgot that the recipe has a little bit of crushed red pepper flake in there, which is just like the right amount of spice. It's super delicious. This original recipe also, you can chop up some kale and add it into here if you want a little bit more veggies in there. I'm probably gonna leave this as is. I'm not gonna put any kale in it, but that turned out so good. I highly recommend this recipe. Again, it's on the FreezerFit website. Okay, so here is our soup. I went ahead and put a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top of this. I will admit this does not look fancy, and it does definitely not look as good as it tastes. Like, it tastes way better than it looks. It obviously looks very plain, but I'm gonna have this with just some rye bread that I buttered. Like I said, you could serve it with salad or garlic bread or something like that as well. The flavor on this is so good, but you see how little time that took me to get dinner on the table? Boom. Magic. Okay, so I hope you guys really enjoyed these tips on freezer cooking and really how to get dinner on the table super fast during the week. Don't forget to check out Fabric by Gerber Life. I'll have that link in the description box below. It seriously takes less than 10 minutes to apply. So definitely get your family protected and covered. And let me know if you have any other tips for freezer meal cooking. Sorry, I'm petting my dog. That I missed in today's video, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.